you've been told Ecclesiastes is the one book in the Bible that sounds like it doesn't believe in God. That claim shows up in sermons, in college classrooms, in late-night arguments about faith. But that reading misses the entire point of the book. Ecclesiastes isn't doubting God, it's doubting something else completely, and once you see what that is, the whole book flips upside down in your mind. Have you ever wondered why a book this bleak survived inside the Bible at all? Stick with this, because by the end, you'll read Ecclesiastes the way it was actually meant to be read. You'll understand the strange Hebrew word that repeats almost 40 times in this short book. You'll see why ancient rabbis argued about ripping it out of Scripture. This isn't a Sunday school gloss. This is what the text is actually doing, sentence by sentence, and it's sharper than you think. Start with the voice speaking in this book. He calls himself Qoheleth, a Hebrew word usually translated as teacher or preacher. Tradition says this is Solomon, the richest king Israel ever had. He built palaces. He planted vineyards, he owned more gold than any ruler of his time, and commanded a kingdom stretched wider than any before it. Many scholars today think the book was actually written centuries after Solomon died, using his name as a literary frame to make the argument land harder. Either way, the point stands, because the voice claims access to everything a human being could ever chase, and still, in the opening lines, he says almost everything is hevel. That word gets translated as vanity, or meaningless, or vapor. The Hebrew literally means breath or mist, something you can feel but never hold. Picture fog rolling across a field at sunrise. You can see it, you can walk through it, but try to grab it and your hand closes on nothing. That image sits underneath every single chapter that follows. That's the word Qoheleth uses 38 times across 12 short chapters, more density than almost any other book in the entire Hebrew Bible. Every kind of striving gets called hevel eventually. Wealth is hevel. Pleasure is hevel. Even wisdom, the thing he values most and returns to again and again, gets called hevel in the same breath. Why would the wisest man in the kingdom spend an entire book tearing down wisdom itself? Because he isn't attacking wisdom as a tool. He's attacking the idea that wisdom or wealth or pleasure, chased hard enough, can hand your life permanent meaning on their own without anything standing behind them. Now notice the second phrase that keeps repeating through this book, like a heartbeat. Qoheleth says under the sun 29 separate times across 12 chapters. That phrase is doing more work than most casual readers ever realize. It sets the exact boundary for everything he's examining, like chalk lines drawn around a crime scene. Under the sun means life as it looks from ground level, without ever glancing past the horizon. It means observing this world using only what your eyes can see and your two hands can touch. Everything he calls meaningless, he's calling meaningless specifically within that narrow frame on purpose every single time. He isn't measuring life against nothing at all. He's measuring it against eternity itself, and eternity keeps winning every round of that contest. This is the twist most people never catch on their first read. Ecclesiastes doesn't read like a book about God because it's deliberately written from ground level, from a limited human view boxed tightly inside time and death. Qoheleth watches a king build an entire empire, stone by stone, and then watches death erase it exactly the way it erases a beggar with nothing to his name. He watches a wise man's memory fade into silence, the same way a fool's memory fades, no faster and no slower. Doesn't that unsettle you a little? Even now, 3,000 years later, sitting somewhere with your own plans and your own quiet ambitions? Pause here for a second, because this is exactly where most explanations get it wrong. People assume the bleakness means the author lost his faith somewhere along the road. But look closer at his actual method, chapter after chapter. He isn't ranting into the void. He's running a controlled experiment, almost like a lab notebook written in poetry. He tests pleasure, chases it fully, and then records the result in plain language. He tests hard work next, pouring himself into it, and records that result too. He tests wisdom, wealth, and legacy, one after another, in careful order, like a scientist running the same chemical through different tests. Every single test comes back with the same reading. Nothing under the sun, tested on its own, lasts long enough to satisfy a soul built for something far bigger than one short lifetime. That's the real argument buried inside this strange little book. Humans were built with eternity set directly inside their hearts, according to chapter 3, verse 11. But we're stuck living entirely inside time, watching everything decay around us, one season at a time, one birthday at a time. That gap between what we long for and what we can actually hold on to with our hands? That's the real subject running through Ecclesiastes from start to finish. It was never really a question about whether God exists. It's about the ache of being a creature who can imagine forever, in vivid detail, but can only ever physically touch today. Here's where the pattern interrupts, because the tone of this book keeps swinging on purpose. One moment Qoheleth sounds almost nihilistic, telling you to eat, drink, and find pleasure in your work because nothing else lasts. The next moment, he sounds like a prophet warning you that God will judge every hidden thing. Both statements sit in the same chapter, sometimes in the same paragraph. That whiplash isn't slobby writing, it's Qoheleth showing you exactly what it feels like to be human, stretched between the temporary and the eternal in real time. Think about how differently Job and Ecclesiastes handle the exact same problem of suffering. Job screams at God directly, in raw anger, demanding answers to his pain across dozens of chapters. Qoheleth never screams at God even once in 12 full chapters. He observes instead, almost like a scientist keeping careful notes on a world that refuses to make tidy sense. That emotional distance is exactly why casual readers mistake his tone for disbelief. Calm honesty about pain gets confused with rejection of God far too easily, and that confusion has followed this book for over 2,000 years of careful readers. Now here's a detail almost nobody brings up in casual conversation. Ancient rabbis actually debated removing Ecclesiastes from the Hebrew Bible entirely. Around 90 AD, during rabbinic discussions connected to the town of Yavne, scholars argued over whether this book even belonged inside Scripture. Some said its contradictions made it dangerous for ordinary readers. Others pointed to the final verses where the tone suddenly locks into place. What tipped the balance in the book's favor? The ending. After 11 chapters of testing everything life has to offer, Qoheleth lands on a single conclusion. Fear God and keep His commandments, because this is the whole duty of everyone alive. That line isn't a contradiction bolted onto the end to fix a broken argument. It's the destination this entire book was walking toward from its very first verse. Every failed experiment under the sun was pointing somewhere the whole time. It was pointing past the sun. Picture the structure like a maze built with one exit. Qoheleth walks you down every dead end so you feel exactly how dead each end really is. Money doesn't satisfy. Pleasure fades fast. Wisdom outlives you by maybe a generation, if you're lucky. Power gets inherited by someone who never earned it and might waste it in a season. He isn't hiding the exit from you. He's making sure you feel the weight of every wrong turn first, so the real answer actually lands when it finally arrives. This changes how you should read the darkest lines in the book. When Qoheleth says a stillborn child is better off than a man who lives 100 years unhappy, he isn't rejecting God's justice. He's pushing the logic of a godless, meaningless universe as far as it can go, on purpose, to show you exactly where that road ends. He wants you to feel the horror of life with no eternal frame around it. Only then does his final answer land with any real weight at all. Stop and consider why this approach still works on modern readers sitting in traffic 3,000 years later. You live in a culture obsessed with productivity, status, and self-improvement content, promising real fulfillment through slightly better habits. Ecclesiastes tested every single one of those promises long before your phone ever existed, long before advertising even had a name. Wealth. Achievement. Constant motion disguised carefully as progress. Every single one of those promises gets tested here, and every single one collapses under the exact same question. Then what? That question, then what, sits underneath the entire book like a floor holding up all the furniture in the room. You get the promotion you wanted so badly. Then what? You build the business from nothing into something real. Then what? You finally reach the exact goal you obsessed over for a decade straight, sacrificing sleep and weekends along the way. Then what happens after that, once the celebration ends and the house goes quiet again? Qoheleth isn't being cynical for the sake of sounding clever or edgy. He's forcing you to trace every single ambition all the way to its actual endpoint, instead of stopping the thought halfway through, the way most people do for their entire lives without ever noticing. Here's the payoff you actually came here for. Ecclesiastes doesn't doubt God, not for a single verse in 12 chapters. It doubts everything except God, systematically, one chapter at a time, using the sharpest tools ancient wisdom literature had available at the time. The despair spread across this book isn't the author's personal collapse of faith. It's a carefully built argument, stacking failure after failure under the sun, until only one thing remains standing outside that frame entirely: untouched by any of it. That's not weak theology hiding behind gloomy poetry, the way skeptics like to claim. That's some of the boldest theology in the entire Bible, delivered through brutal honesty instead of comfortable cliches people repeat without thinking. And once you notice that pattern, you can't really unsee it again. Once you read it this way, the whole book quietly rearranges itself inside your mind. The famous opening line, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity," stops sounding like defeat the moment you understand the frame around it. It starts sounding like a diagnosis instead, precise and clear-eyed, written by someone who tested every cure available under the sun and found every single one incomplete on its own. Qoheleth isn't the voice of doubt hiding inside Scripture by accident. He's the voice of someone who searched harder than almost anyone else in recorded history and came back with an answer bigger than the question he started with. That's not a small thing to pull off in 12 short chapters written thousands of years ago. So here's your next step. Go read Ecclesiastes yourself, straight through in one sitting if you can manage it. Notice every time the phrase "under the sun" shows up, and notice what changes the moment it disappears. You'll start seeing this ancient book differently within the first 3 chapters alone. And if this kind of reading changed how you see one of the strangest books in the Bible, follow along for the next one, because there are more of these hiding in plain sight.